today. Please give a warm welcome to Alex.
Thanks, everyone. Just before we start, you'll see our Twitter, CMPNB, and then it's a French one, at GRCNB. Our team is watching this back home, so if you're talking about it, how's that working? That's better? So if you're talking about it and tweeting about it, we'll follow a little bit better. I'm Paul Green. I'm the Director of Strategic Communications for the RCMP in New Brunswick. And with me is Alex Bass. He's one of our communications specialists. We actually have a team of 4. And before we get started, just a little we actually go back with at least 4 years in background in radio. We worked together for the same television station in Canada for about 7 years together. And now we're with the Mounties together. So God's punishing one. Our communications approach is very much like our journalism background. We apply to that policing environment, and we feel it works, and we think you'll agree after you see the presentation. The goal of our strategic communications is very simple. It's prevent and solve crime, same as any officer, and that's what we're using communications for. Everything we do needs to come back to that. So what you're going to see, much of what we're doing is strategic communications rather than public relations. And that's how we use social media. So today we're going to share with you how we primarily use social media in our communications response to a shooting that killed 3 of our police officers and injured 2 others. And it shut down a city for 30 hours. What we learned, we'll talk about that, some of the gaps that we did have that we had to step over, and very importantly, the public reaction to all of that as well. Now, while there's an internal review that's taking place, which is normal in these kinds of situations, and there is a court case, although it's close to the end, it is still not finished. So there may be questions you may have at the end that we simply may not be able to answer. So I just want to let you know that right off the bat, but we'll try to answer as much as we can. The presentation, we need to start it out in memory of our 3 fallen members. What's unfortunate is we're here today because of the tragedy that affected us and our organization. Constable for Fabrice Chaudin, 6 years of service. He was a member of the dive team, 45 years old, and married with 1 child. Constable Dave Ross, 7 years of service, a dog man. He was 32, married with 1 child, and his second child was born just a few days ago. Constable Doug Large, 12 years of service, major crime investigator, commander's commendation for saving a child's life, 40, married with 3 children. All 3 gave their lives to protect the citizens of Moncton and the neighborhood where they live. And while we learned some very, very valuable lessons in social media communications, and that's why we're here, I don't want us to lose husbands, sons, brothers, fathers, and police officers. So before we go on, you need to better understand where Moncton, New Brunswick is on the map. It's a Canadian coast of Canada, part of a trio of provinces called the Maritimes, and it's located in the southeast corner of New Brunswick. It's a population of approximately 70,000 people. When you add in the suburbs, it goes to about 130,000. And all of it is policed by the Kodiak Regional RCMP. We also have the New Brunswick RCMP, which we're part of. So Kodiak is a detachment. So the New Brunswick RCMP, we police about 500,000 people in New Brunswick with a population of 750,000. It's a quiet community. Regular types of criminal offenses, break-and-enters, crime rate is certainly relatively low. And in fact, the deaths of our 3 members in Moncton, it was the first homicides we had in Brunswick all year. And it's a very rare event for a police officer to be murdered in New Brunswick. The last time was 30 years ago. So certainly during our career, we didn't ever see that. So I think that's probably why it's echoed across the country and around the world.
So June 4th, 2014, a day I won't forget, a day that many Monktonians won't forget, New Brunswickers, Canada, and it echoed around the world. It's a day that is in our minds forever. And the initial call came in at 19:20 Atlantic time, and the call was about a man in camouflage, carrying firearms, walking down the street and between some homes. So we responded. We sent our police officers in. Social media, they saw the activity going on in the neighborhood. They saw what was happening on Twitter, Facebook. They were quick. They were rapid. They were very, very descriptive of what was happening. People were telling what they saw, what they heard. And those posts were raw with emotion. And this is what we saw on social media. This picture was one of the first pictures that was posted on Twitter. And I first saw this picture when I picked up my daughter from work. I received a call going to work. I had to make a quick pit stop to pick her up from work. I picked her up, and she's in the car saying, "Dad, what's going on?" I said, "I got to go to work." She then shows me her phone and says, "Is this what you're going into?" And it was that image right there. And I said, "Yeah, I hadn't seen that image until she showed me." So she's at work getting this kind of tweet. So it is spread rapidly. And as you can see from the tweets, talking about cop cars going down the road, people are petrified, still in the basement with the family. These are the types of tweets on Twitter and the posts that we saw on Facebook. And then this shows up on social media. They're walking down the residential street, dressed in camouflage, carrying firearms. This is what the people in that particular neighborhood were witnessing on the evening of June the 4th. So you can imagine, Twitter is just lit up. They're seeing posts, they're seeing images, and they ended up on Facebook.
Jesus Christ. Do you see him? Oh my goodness! Was my dad? Go down!
He's on.
Oh my God! He's on!
So that they spread and received a number of taken down off of Facebook by people. But it's still floating around on YouTube. It can be seen and shared repeatedly, and it was that particular image that really then sparked the media. So now they had images that verified what had happened. They had seen the tweets, didn't know what was going on, so they're sending the people home. So we have a crew of about 7 people in total. However, 3 of our employees are on maternity leave, so our staff is reduced. So we had to figure out, okay, how are we going to respond to this and make this work? We needed to have a sustainable plan because we weren't sure how long it was going to go on. This wasn't an incident that was going to be over in a couple of hours. In fact, it lasted over a couple of days. So we had to figure out how best to proceed. Information that was coming in and the request that we had coming into us. So we put out. And what we did was, it took us a while, came out a couple of hours after the initial call, spinning away here, so it was, you can see it.
So our first weeks, they were 2 hours after the initial call. I know probably everyone's thinking, boy, that's a long time, and it absolutely is. But as mentioned earlier, this was a file that was developing, and we needed to ensure whatever was being sent out was accurate, because the world was watching now. And the importance of accuracy, and we learned that throughout, it was just paramount to making sure that this, the information on social media was correct. For example, there were messages, the number of fatalities, it ranged to a small number to quite a great number, and that not only police officers had been killed, but civilians had been killed as well. And we attributed that later because plain clothes during that. But this is the information that we have coming in.
So I was the communication strategist on the ground at the detachment. So I was the direct link with the incident commander. So I'm that link between the incident commander and social media. And myself, along with Constable Danny Ontario, who is our media relations officer, the equivalent of a public information officer, PIO, we had both actually just returned from the SMILE conference in Tampa, Florida. We had returned back on the weekend, and on Wednesday, this particular incident happened. It's top of mind for you right away. This was information out to the public. Because evening, it's going to get together and the local. And you know, this ended up being an incident that lasted for 30 hours. So we had to keep going. And the idea was just to keep the information up there that people needed to stay community. And as you can see, the city closest to the activity knew that. And what also happened is that people who had family or friends who lived there would get that information and they would contact those individuals and share it immediately. So we tried to cast as wide a net as possible. So in the first few hours, we put out a tweet about every 30 minutes. And when I'm talking tweet, I'm saying we posted it on Twitter and Facebook at the same time. So that we captured both of the main social media accounts that people use. Little did we know that it would go on for 30 hours, and actually I went back and counted all the tweets. And in that 30 hours, we put out 30 tweets. It worked out to be 1 an hour. But we were putting out one every 30 minutes in the first 12 hours, 6 hours, 8 to 12 hours. We were constantly on Facebook and Twitter and made sure we had a presence there. So by doing that, we didn't put out any information to the media at this point in time. We were just too concentrated on figuring out what was going on and getting the information out. Well, this is what happened. The media started retweeting our tweets. But they would add things like "heed the warning," "latest," "new retweet." So they were already capturing our material. And the individuals that I've selected here represent each of the major television networks in Canada, of either a television anchor or a reporter for those networks. So this information wasn't just being kept in our local community, but it was being spread out across Canada as they started following us on Twitter. And what was interesting is that this became their main source of information as well, because we just had too many calls coming in to start responding individually to the media one-on-one. It just wasn't going to happen at all. Because as soon as we would answer the phone, there'd be one stuff to go on. So this is the first couple of tweets. This is what happened, how the media picked up on it very rapidly, so all of a sudden they're following it. This is one of the first tweets we put out. You'll notice the time, 20 to 17. It's about an hour after our first tweet, and we've gone ahead, we've been able to identify the individual, his name, where he's from. We also told the community considered armed and dangerous. And then we immediately followed it up. 2 minutes later, with a call to action. So this man is armed and dangerous, but we wanted anyone with information to call 911. And we did receive lots of calls from people on the street, people who were traveling in the area, calling us to tell us that they were reporting where this individual was in their neighborhood. And it was great to see the community come back and help us throughout all of this. So it was through the close contact that I had with not only the incident commander, but also the lead investigator now on our investigation. And it was through direct contact with him that we were able to put out this particular photo. So this image was taken by a Times and Transcript photographer who happened to be in the neighborhood around the time, and he captures this particular image. We took it off of social media and we retweeted it. And we sent it out with our tweets because we wanted people to know who they were looking for, not only a name and age and where it was from, but a picture. And this also got retweeted and shared very quickly throughout the evening. And then this goes out. Just before 11 p.m., we send out this tweet that confirms that 3 of our officers have been killed, 2 other officers have been injured, and that we were still looking for the shooter in the community. And this, of course, is when our call volume went up. The phones just went nuts as the media were all calling, and we were receiving calls from all over the place. And you know, the hard part of this was that this event, it was, you know, the greatest number of police officers killed on duty in Canada in nearly a decade. So it was a significant news event, not only in our community, not only Canada, but it echoed around the world, and the media calls just escalated.
Yeah, the phone lit up. It was NBC calling, CNN, the BBC, Reuters. So that's why we had to really go to that, because as soon as you hung up the phone checking one voicemail, there's a dozen more. We just didn't have the capacity to be able to start responding to media interviews. So we knew we had to keep people informed throughout the night. There were no retweets. These were original tweets. Even if the message was the same, it didn't matter. It became an original tweet from us, because again, you've got to remember, there's people with their kids, they're in their basements, they're scared, and this is information that at least we're still there with them, and they realize that. So we asked people, you'll see here too, to leave their outdoor lights on. And this was really interesting. This came as a response to someone who on Facebook posted a note on Facebook to us and said, would it help if we left the outdoor lights on? And our media relations officer in Kodiak thought, yeah, it would. So we had sent that out. So it was really kind of that crowdsourcing of helping us. This is a heavily residential neighborhood. There's thousands of people that live in there. And we also realized that all these tweets going out, we didn't know if the shooter had a cell phone, was following us, following other people on social media. That was a possibility as well. So there were people, including the media, who were tweeting the location of our officers. And we saw that in another case there yesterday. So we made the request of them not to share our location. And what was interesting, that request was largely abided by. In fact, if somebody did tweet our officer's location, other people on social media would chastise them for it, and it would really shut it down. So we saw that. There's another thing we learned too, and that was the importance of the visual that goes with the tweet. So there was some planning that Alex had done with criminal analysts about 4 in the morning, started making this map that we're going to show you. So we gave people an idea as they're going into work. It turned out not too many people were traveling at all, but which is the area that was the perimeter that we had secured. So this was the spot, and there's 2 major thoroughfares through there. So this was a significant disruption to the city of Moncton. The city virtually shut down, major stores shut down. The biggest mall in the Maritime shut down. So it was a significant event. And this was the headline people woke up to. This is the Moncton Times and Transcript newspaper, and this is what they saw that morning. And what was interesting in the story is the paper itself was talking about our tweets. We did a very brief news scrum after midnight, really with the same messages, but it was very brief. And again, the news was coming via social media. That's how it was getting to the public. It was going through our account, and that's how it was getting to the media as well.
So we continued to use social media even to advise the media of a news conference to provide them with a situational update of what had happened through the night and how things were proceeding. So this was the only notification that we sent out to the media. And it was circulated, the local media picked up on it, any other media that happened to fly in or drive in overnight found out about it. And the room was packed. There was approximately 15 television cameras there and about 30 reporters. So they received the message. We did not put it on our website. We sent out no other notification of the situational update that morning except on Twitter. And as you can see, we sent it out at 9:43 in the morning. The event actually had called to start at 10:45 and actually started at around 11. Once everybody got situated in the place. So what we did was we also made sure that The public, who we had kept updating throughout the night on a regular basis, also knew what was happening through the situational update. We weren't relying on the media to get that message out. We wanted to get it out to citizens as quickly as possible, because many of them had a sleepless night. They didn't sleep. They were wondering what was going on, what were police doing. So what we did is we tweeted out key quotes from the statement from our Assistant Commissioner, Roger Brown, who is the commanding officer of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in New Brunswick. He attended, as well as the officer in charge of the Kodiak detachment. The detachment was directly affected. And we made sure that people knew who was speaking and its key quote. And as you can see, it was a rather emotional event for both of our senior officers as well. But we also put out a photo. We grabbed it. I took this with BlackBerry. We incorporated it into the tweet. We again had a call to action. What's interesting is that this one particular tweet, and the message really didn't talk about what was happening overnight with the vigilance. But at the bottom, you'll see it had 1,000 retweets. And it grew. The other retweets prior to that were less than that. So people were sharing it, but with the photo, because what this photo does is it confirms and makes it very clear that these people are addressing the situation. It is a news conference situation, and the quotes are coming from it. So all in one place. The person that's looking at that tweet doesn't have to wonder, come from someone else. This is coming from an authoritative source, and it's the RCMP.
So the whole province was on high alert, and we had some distractions. Ormocto is a town, it's a military town, about an hour and a half from Moncton, and we had a report of a man in camouflage, which isn't unheard of, certainly in a military town. However, they thought he may match the description. So this was going on social media, that there was this guy may be in Ormocto. Media's calling us, it's starting, we do an investigation, and we make sure we follow through. As soon as we put that one up and it was unfounded, that ended our media call. So that got rid of that distraction for us.
And again, the public appreciated that and retweeted the fact that it was unfounded. What it did was that because we were providing these updates on all of the situations that they were seeing and hearing on Twitter, and knew that we were providing updates as quickly as we could, was that they knew we were on top of it. They could trust us with the information that they were sending out. And as a result, they continued to follow us.
So we did a situational update later that afternoon. We posted the entire statement on Facebook, and I want to say you can see Corporal Chantal Farah. She's one of our actual 3 people we talked about having maternity leaves. She was one who was on maternity leave, showed up at the office 8 a.m. that morning and said, I'm here to work on pencils if you want me to. And she was putting on a news conference broadcast that afternoon. So special thanks to Chantal. So we posted that entire statement on Facebook so the public, again, had the same information at the same time that the media did. And this is something we did throughout this entire event. It was key for it. Social media really was always our main focus because we knew we were reaching the media as well. So it wasn't a need for a separate strategy. Sort of, yes, we need to have some media availability. I heard so. Yes, we never ignored the media. We had the situational updates. But we always made sure that information was going over real time to the general public. So this helped us a bit too. Certainly there was an onus on the media to report our messaging that we had because the public had that same information. And that was important.
So later that evening on June the 5th, we continue to advise the public the shooter's still out there. We continue to tell them what subdivision, what area we believe that shooter to be in. Continue to stay locked inside, and we also ask again, leave outdoor lights on. This message was primarily for the perimeter area that you saw on the map that was directly affected. What we didn't realize was that this was going to go viral, and the turning of the lights on became a focal point for people across Moncton. This picture is actually from just outside the perimeter of Moncton. It stretched to Scotland. It stretched then to New York City. And then it started developing its own hashtag, and somebody put together this montage of a number of photos. And what we saw were people taking pictures of their outdoor lights, or any light. If they lived in an apartment, they took a picture of an indoor light. It was their way to be a part of it, to share the grief and sorrow with the community. So it gave them a focal point. Little did we know that that was going to happen. Our initial idea of putting the lights on was because somebody said, "Can I do it?" And we thought, no, it will probably help our operational side. But what it did was it went viral and also became a comfort for people around the world. So 30 hours after the initial call, at 12:10 in the morning, the individual was arrested. He's in police custody. People in the northern part of Moncton can now leave their homes. Basically saying it's safe to go out. And it took some time. We posted this at 1:30, so the arrest was made around 12:10. But again, we had to make sure our information was accurate. There was no way of pulling it back once it came. So we had to go through our incident commanders, make sure that, yes, this individual was in custody, it's the person that we were seeking. So once we had all that confirmation, we were then able to put out our post. What's interesting is that we also put it out on Facebook, so all the media was covered. But what you guys probably don't know to this point is that everything we've done in 2 official languages. Canada is an officially bilingual country, so is New Brunswick, where we live, and the RCMP operates in both official languages. So everything we put out on all 4 of our accounts, we have 2 English accounts for Twitter and Facebook, and 2 in French for Facebook and Twitter. And so everything had to be translated and make sure that it went out at the same time. So we would use, we were using Hootsuite, TweetDeck, and filling in everything as quickly as we can to get it out.
So again, we continue that same social media approach for this, what was a very significant news conference that morning. Media were invited to attend to make sure those key quotes that are in there. We were live tweeting the news conference, and I'll tell you, I will never do a news conference on anything again with a live tweeting. It's your way to reach the public directly. So as you can imagine, our social media audience had exploded over these past 30 hours. Twitter climbed. June 4th afternoon, we had about 8,000 followers on the English and French accounts. 30 hours later, it's 56,000. And Facebook went up as well. It was about 10,000, went to about 28,000. So our audience on social media became larger than the largest newspaper circulation in New Brunswick, and larger than the biggest television audience in New Brunswick as well. So we realized there were people following us from around the world. Neil was one of them here from England. He was following us. But we also noticed there were a lot of people who were following us. They may not live in New Brunswick, but they had a connection to New Brunswick. They had a family member or a friend there. So maybe that person that was in the basement wasn't on Twitter, but they were calling in their friends and family members to give them a call to tell them what was taking place. So you can imagine after we caught the shooter, the community expelled a collective sigh of relief. Their comments appeared very quickly on social media. You saw the retweets, around 14,000 that we had on that. And residents just simply were celebrating their ability to leave their home. They've been locked down for 30 hours. And what was interesting, I don't think we received a single complaint about that because we kept communicating with them. We kept letting them know what we were doing. They also took time to grieve with us. This was an impromptu vigil on the Friday night. It was held in front of the Kodiak detachment. They blocked the main street in Moncton. Residents just came together as a community to grieve and laid flowers and balloons and cards all across the front of the detachment. And how did they know to do that? Social media.
So we not only worked on the investigation side of it, of this file, but we also assisted the families. The families also understood the outpouring from the community. They witnessed it, they were feeling it as well. So we worked with them. We offered our services to help them. If there's anything for the families to accept, and on their behalf, we posted statements from the families on our CNP New Brunswick website. We sent out Twitter and Facebook messages to advise the public that that was the case, so that if they wanted to hear from the family, this was their opportunity. Now, the families did not do any media interviews at all. This was just a written statement that came directly from the families to the community at large. And it was very well received. So on June the 10th, 4 days after the individual was arrested, to hold a regimental funeral. The first meeting I attended for this funeral was on Saturday after the shooting. We were advised that morning that the funeral would be held on Tuesday afternoon, 4 days later. So we were doing a full regimental funeral for 3 fallen members. And as you can see from the pictures, the parade prior to was enormous. And throughout all of this, again, social media was the key way we informed people of when the funeral was being held, where it was being held. We also talked and let them know that there was public visitation, where they could go in the hours for the public visitation. So the public was always informed through social media what was happening. Every shooter had been arrested, there was still interest in what was happening. And that's what we did. So the funeral was held at the Moncton Coliseum. It's the largest, it seats about 7,000 people. The entire lower bowl was filled with law enforcement officers, RCMP law enforcement officers from across Canada, as well as from the United States who made the trip up to the regimental funeral. Now this funeral was live streamed around the world. It appeared on 19 international television networks. So the world had an interest in us. They wanted to know what was happening. The Prime Minister of Canada also attended. The Prime Minister was one of the speakers at this funeral. So what did we do in terms of social media during the funeral? This is it. This is one of the pictures of the funeral. And this was the tweet we put out. This tweet went out 5 minutes before the funeral. It was the only tweet that the RCMP New Brunswick account and Facebook account put out that day. There was no need to send anything more on that.
So we had a little surprise in all this that we didn't quite anticipate. And this is a photo by the Canadian press at the beginning of the iconic images of all of this. It's Police Service Dog Danny. I don't know if you can read the text on there in the back, but it says, Canine Dog Danny sniffs the Stetson of his partner, slain Constable David Ross, during the funeral procession for the 3 RCMP officers who were killed on duty. This image resonated with thousands of people who watched the funeral, and also during the funeral, you could hear Danny at the front around his coffin. You could hear him whining a bit at the front, so people heard that when they were watching the funeral. So we recognized right away there was going to be some significant media and public interest in this. And of course, the media calls really started coming in once this all appeared on social media. So we had to put a plan together. There were trainers from the RCMP Dog Training Center. They were on hand to make sure that Danny's needs were met, along with the former dog handler from the Kodiak detachment. And so we knew from our experience over the past several days, it needed to have that social media component. How are we going to reach the public directly? So we needed to include a video, and that's what we did to show that Danny was fine despite the death of his master. And what we did is we posted that video to YouTube and made our media relations officer available for comment. So Alex is just going to play through a little bit of the video that we took on that day. So it's just Danny following in the screen. And we did it the traditional way. We could bring the media out to go take some pictures and go do some interviews. We didn't do any of that. We posted it on YouTube, and the media used that video as well. So we didn't have to try to organize a major media event. We simply had the people had the video in place for them, and had a media relations officer who could do the interview. And this poster, by the way, this video up till now, it's probably around, if you go on it, it's around 100,000 views it's received. Maybe one of the biggest, largest videos viewed the RCMP anywhere across the country. So this here, you can see here, this is the Facebook post. It reached 850,000 people. We've never seen anything like that. So that was, again, it was the interest from the funeral from seniors, that aspect, that human touch that touched a lot of people. And people certainly appreciated the update, and they reacted.
So the community reacted not only on Facebook, Twitter, through social media, but they also acted by coming to the detachment. And what they did, you already saw some of the pictures of the flowers and cards and gifts that were left in front of the detachment. We recognized that we had to do something with all of that. So we informed the public that on Father's Day, we would be collecting all of the flowers, all of the cards, all of the paper products that were left behind and take them in. And we would save what we could to share with the families so they could see what the general public had left. So there were stuffed animals, there were paintings, there were carvings in rocks, and paintings, cards from children, adults, the community just left all kinds of material. On the Thursday before the weekend, the weather forecast changed. There's rain coming. As you can see here, Superintendent Marlene Snowman, the officer in charge of the Kodiak detachment, so it was for 3 officers who were killed. Says, you can't leave that out there for Sunday. You have to go in. You have to. So she called Paul called me, and I said, no problem, we're going to tweet out, we tweeted out. So we didn't want the public to be surprised. So again, keeping them informed. So we told them, because of the impending weather, we're going to be now collecting paper products, gifts that could get ruined by rain. Well, it's interesting that all of a sudden the community starts showing up. They lend a hand. They help her bring this stuff in. It was incredible. I'm standing there, and there's just people coming up and help. I heard this was going on. I want to help. Oh, this is a great idea. Not only did they express it on Facebook and Twitter, but they also showed up at the detachment. But while that was going on, our investigation was still continuing. We still had a shooter that we had arrested, and we had to take to court and trial. That's right. So our investigators recognized that social media was really important in this, and that what happened on June 4th, you saw one of the videos, that many people may have video, may have photos on their smartphones that we could get access to that could potentially be evidence. So in order to make it easier for people to send that in, the RCMP, for the first time in the country, developed a portal, a website that allowed individuals to be able to upload those videos and photos directly. So we did receive material in this manner, and in speaking to investigators, this is something in case you're looking at deep, remind us to tell you that while collecting this way through a single portal like this certainly is convenient, you have to be ready for the amount of information that can potentially come in. And you have to have those investigators ready to follow up on that information. So this message was repeated several times to make sure people saw it. We didn't just send out one tweet, we didn't just send out one Facebook message, we sent it out several times. Social media played a very important role in reassuring the public and also stopping spreading innuendo and rumors. We were having a lot of that. That really started just a couple of days after the funeral. We have a page on our website. It's called Setting Records Straight. You know, generally for media, if there's information, there's something to put out, and it's wrong. And we've tried to fix it, we've discussed it with them, and it's not getting rectified. So we have an audience, so we use that. And a few days after the funeral, there were people, as you can imagine, offering that armchair quarterback advice, and this is what must be what happened, this is how it took place, and media were using those stories as well. We hadn't even done our investigation yet at all. We didn't know. It was still ongoing, so we didn't know what was going on. And that's what we told the public. We told them. It's the investigation's ongoing. We addressed all those matters in this statement and posted it on Twitter and Facebook, and the public appreciated it. In fact, I had a lady that she just started 6 weeks before for us, and we posted on Facebook and sent positive towards it. She said she had never seen that in her career in communication, so they appreciated that information. And it was another example of where talking to the public directly is so valuable doing something like this. So what we didn't realize is that we were doing our job. We were using a tool, social media, that I learned a lot about at the Smile conference that I attended prior to the event. And little do we know is that as a result of our work on social media, we became a media story as well. And we were mentioned in a story that talked about PR good for forces, setting warnings of pitfalls, that talked about how we were able to keep the public informed. There was also another story from the talking about the pitfalls that was happening. Because a little bit like, I'm sorry about that. What we did was one of the stories talking about how the RCMP New Brunswick put on a master class on social media. Actually, we was Lori about what we did, and she was quoted in the story. So little did we know that that was also going to happen, that we would end up being a news story for how we reacted to the incident. We also had Twitter's perspective on this, and just to let you know, we nearly ended up in Twitter jail. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with Twitter jail, but the coffee is.
Yep.
Twitter jail is basically Twitter watches all the accounts, and if they see unusual activity. So there's a lot of tweets going out, and that's what I thought it was. So we were kind of managing our tweets, but it also involves the number of followers we gain and how quickly we gain them. Paul had already mentioned, we shot up to over 50,000 followers in about a 30-hour period. So luckily, Steve Ladurante, who is with Twitter, he's their news and government head in Canada for Twitter, he was following what we were doing. And through him, and I only found this out sometime after the event, he verified our account on the fly. Thank you for that. Otherwise, we would have been in Twitter jail and then trying to figure out what to do. As a result of being verified, all the algorithms that Twitter has are shut off, and you're not caught up and heading towards Twitter jail, and your account suspended for anywhere from 24 to 48 hours, I believe, is the time period. But for Steve and Twitter, what was interesting was this, for them, they saw their social media application being used as a news feed. Constant information over a period of time. And this is what he said. They used their Twitter feed as a primary communications channel with the city's residents. It led to a dramatic increase in followers during the crisis. Yeah, we saw that for sure. They provided crucial information to citizens and were also able to deal with local and international media with bombarded with attachment questions. We had so much inquiries coming in that there was no way that we were going to be able to respond to all those inquiries, so social media was a way to communicate with them in a very direct manner.
So you're probably wondering, what did we learn? We certainly saw the importance of staying true to your communications approach, and we did that by using the social media channels to help the RCMP solve and prevent crime. So we were helping the investigators. We never wavered from that goal throughout this. We didn't start retweeting the thank yous, the nice pictures, although it was great to see. We weren't using that channel for that. It was to, again, that focus, solve and prevent crime. Make sure everyone on your team knows how social media is used. We don't have a social media manager. I have Alex as a subject matter expert, if you will, but everybody has access to it. Everyone knows that's a tool to be used. It's one of the main channels that we use for this. Recognizing social media can be your news feed service. We realized we didn't need to be dependent on the traditional media. I don't want to take away from this. This isn't a bash the media whatsoever. They have a job to do, and they were helpful as well at getting that. But you do not have to be dependent on that. You can have your own tools, and so that your information is going to the public in real time, not when the next newscast is. So think of your community first, not the media first. Remember, you're putting it that relevant information to the public. Recognize what your social media channels are capable of. We've learned Twitter is like the front page of the newspaper. It's that lead story on the television newscast. This is the information that people want to know about and share immediately. Facebook, you saw the number of views for Danny the dog. It can be more, it's almost like that lifestyle section of the newspaper. It's many of the newscast story. That's where people go to share a lot of pictures and have more emotion. And that's where we really saw that outpouring of caring. And the public will police your social media channels. We generally did not. We didn't have to. But we advise people not to post positions of our police officers. Like I said earlier, followers were quick to chastise those that did, and the only ones who really violated that was a couple of media reporters who ironically were tweeting about not the position where we were, and were then posting where we were. But the public kept on them as well, so that really helped.
There's just an update to carry on 6 weeks after the incident. We recognized the 5-week mark, we needed to put out a message. The community is still on high alert. It's still nervous. And what we saw was an increasing call for shots fired. People would hear a bang, it would be fireworks. Maybe a dump truck, a big truck going over a pothole, bang, bang, bang. People thought that the shots were fired. They called 911. They called police immediately. So we recognized that. And before we started getting calls from the media about what was going on, what's happening, we decided to put out a statement. And this statement came out after one particular incident that really kind of heightened the community. And it was a man who was returning a part to a car parts store, and it was in a strip mall. There was probably a half a dozen stores. And he was carrying the part in a plastic bag, but out the back end of the plastic bag was something long and black. So a community on the edge was thinking, a gun is going into that store. We got the call, and we sent multiple units and multiple police officers to this particular call. Again, a residential area, it was an area where there were a lot of people gathering because of the mall. He didn't have a firearm. He had a car part that he was returning to the store. People, of course, seeing this massive response, thought of what happened on June 4th. We knew that they were concerned. So what we did was we had the Superintendent Marlon Snowman prepare a statement and talk about those incidents, how we respond, and why we respond. Again, explaining to them what was happening. Again, we saw the comments. Thank you. Oh, that's good to know. So even though the event had long passed, we were still monitoring what was going on in our community so that we could be very proactive in addressing it before it got out of hand. And a lot of people really appreciate that. So, Police Services Danny has been reassigned as of a couple of weeks ago. We returned back to the RCMP Dog Training Center and worked with a new handler, and has been now reassigned to a new detachment. Again, we kept the public in the loop. There was so much interest in Danny that we had to let them know, don't worry, Danny's been looked after, he has a new master, and he's going back to work. Again, the people thanked us. They said, oh, great. And so one of the comments was from a lady saying, oh, my daughter and I were talking about him the other day. Wasn't that great? No. So we were connecting and keeping that connection with the community. And the final piece that's left is the sentencing of the shooter, and his sentencing hearing will be happening on October 27th.
Yeah, we should add, he pled guilty back in August to 3 counts of first-degree murder in Canada. That's a life sentence. No chance of parole for 25 years, and the Crown is looking to get his current. So that he would have no chance of parole for 75 years. So that's the next piece. So, Alex and I really want to thank everyone for this opportunity. This is the first opportunity we've had to actually present this in the work that we have done during this event. And we want to end it by sharing some of the thank yous that we received in the community. The entire city, I've never seen anything like this. To go there, you could feel the love for law enforcement, police, emergency services, and you saw the pictures of the detachment. But these are some of the signs that we saw, and this was everywhere. This was all over the city.
And I live in the city of Moncton, and I'm going to tell you, there are still some of these signs out there. And this incident happened in June, and every time I see it, it touches me, and there's one on the street near my home that I drive by, and it's there, constant reminder. But what it tells me is that the community still hasn't forgotten either, and that's why.
Contact information is up there. You see the Facebook, Twitter, the website as well, and Alex and my contact information. If you're still watching back home, certainly want to thank our communications team, Julie, Chantel, Jennifer, Catherine, Danielle. We had some folks come from Halifax the other time, and Dave, Stephanie, and Sherry Lynn from Ottawa that came down to assist. So we had a lot of help, and certainly was a team effort. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.